Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today we are thinking about paranormal experiences. Yes, I bet you this is one that you guys were waiting for. Like, when is this girl going to talk about this? Well, this is the moment. And we have a special guest, Margaret, here. Thank you so much, Margaret, for coming on my show and thinking with us about paranormal experience. So let's just dive right in. And I have to ask you, what makes you a believer of the paranormal?
Ever since I was a child, I've always had good relationships with animals. And I think that that was the first sort of inkling that there was something different. I think that, I've always had very good relationships with animals. I've always understood them, and some people haven't. It's not, there's no voices, there's no, when I have any kind of experience, there's always an emotion and a certain feeling comes through and it's just a strong feeling. I have a strong reaction. I have strong feelings. And it started as childhood with animals and understanding animals. And as I got older, it developed into something more along the lines of, you could walk into a room and just understand that this is not the right place, or this just is not, this is not the right place to be. And I've stood in places where I'm like, I don't need to stand here. And it comes just as a very strong emotion that is like, don't stand here, or don't go do this, or, it was interesting. One thing that just popped up that just came to mind was, during the pandemic, as we went into the pandemic, and now that I get older, as we went into the pandemic, my husband and I had a cruise schedule. And it was, we were going to go in this European cruise, and it was the first time we were traveling over to the UK. We've traveled extensively on this side of the world, but not on the other side. And, just as we were coming to the pandemic, they were canceling cruises, and my cruise was still scheduled. And my father's passed by this time. And I just had this really strong dream where he came to me and he's like, you don't need to go on that cruise. You do not need to, and I just woke up. He's like, you just don't need to go. You can go another time. And, within a week it was canceled. The company canceled it because we were heading in the pandemic. But, as I got older, more experiences like that started to occur. And I think as someone who has these experiences, you have to be open. You have to listen. You have to, you can't just shut it off. You have to be receptive to these kinds of feelings, emotions, to things that speak to you beyond yourself. And so I think the more, being a creative person, I've been involved in the performing arts all my life. And so being an overly creative person, I just have a tendency to listen and be receptive. So I think that that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I like your response because when you have these experiences, you kind of have to be open. You have to be open-minded, and really try to not not close it off or pinpoint it to one specific thing. You know what I mean? You have to allow
Mhm.
everything to be a possibility. I mean, I know it sounds weird for the people who don't or never had an experience that was paranormal, in that essence. But when you have that moment, it's kind of like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Oh, okay. It's just like any other moment. You know what I mean? It's weird, but does that make sense?
Yes, no, that does make sense. I was thinking of another time, and this has happened more than once to me. I think it started around high school. And it doesn't happen that much now. I think during high school and college, I was facing a lot of challenges, a lot of choices, and then that time in your life, you're really facing a lot of decisions. And, at that age, you don't always make the smartest decisions. And so you question a lot of things at that time in your life. And there were a couple experiences I had where I would literally be standing somewhere. And the one that I thought of was, I was living in a place I didn't want to live in. I was living with people I didn't want to live with. It was college, I was out on my own, living in a rental home. And I was in a place that wasn't very comfortable, and it wasn't a good place for me. And I just was walking by the dryer, and I stopped, because I was bemoaning the fact that we didn't have a washer, and we had a dryer, and I had to go to the laundromat to do laundry, and I had to come home and dry the clothes. And it was just, everything was just a struggle. And it had a lot to do with who I was living with at the time. And I stopped at the dryer, and there was just this notion that came into my head of, you will be in a different place. you will be in a different place with a washer and dryer. And it sounds so trivial, but it was so strong. It was like, you will be in a better place. You will be in a different place. You will have a washer and dryer. Everything's going to be okay. But that person you're with, you're not going to be with, and it's going to be okay. And it was so funny because it's not funny, but it was just, I almost turned to the right to ask a question, and I literally turned, and it was like, because that was part of, the answers I just gave you were part of my questions. So I turned and asked a question. It was like, the first thought that came in was, you're going to be someplace where you're going to have a washer and dryer. Am I going to be okay? Yes. Is this other person going to be with, I turned to the left. Is this other person going to be with me? No, but it's okay. And it was just, but there wasn't a voice. It's always feelings, but it was so powerful. And I just stood there and went, I'm going to be okay. I just, whatever's coming in the future, I'm going to be okay. And what it did happen that way. And when I reached that point, I was in a much better place. It brought me to a better place in my life, and I just felt that, that moment was something that was telling me it's going to be, things are going to change and it's going to be different, but it's going to be all okay.
Yeah.
And so that was just really nice.
Yeah, that is very nice. It sounds very peaceful, and I've had moments like that where I was in such a hard time, such a life. And when you talked about you were just around people that you knew you shouldn't have been with, and just the circumstances were where it was, and your choices kept choosing you to be in that situation, I can absolutely agree. And I've had moments where I would pray for it to get better, and it just was like it only got worse. So then I was just like,
Mhm.
what am I doing, or what am I praying, or where are my words wrong? So once I started changing my words, like everything started changing. And I had those type of moments where it was just like I started having dreams of me being in a different situation, and it's just like getting away from from like, from getting into a new chapter, you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
always kind of like a difficult, because it's like, oh, how is it going to happen? What is going to do? What's going to be next? Or, that process. But that is very interesting. That is so interesting. So I'm curious, what made you start writing, and what made you get into the genre of paranormal experiences? Because from what you've told me so far with your own paranormal experiences in those moments, they seem good, you know what I mean? They don't seem
Oh
necessarily
yeah.
scary where you would see, like, The Conjuring, or you know what I mean? Things of that
No.
nature where it's like people are, like, traumatized.
Right. No, I mean, I've had negative experiences. Don't get me wrong. There's house shopping. House shopping is always, which I haven't had to do, thankfully, for 13 years. We're at our current house for 13 years. But you go house shopping. You go in other people's homes, and whether they're empty or they're occupied, or every house has its own energy. Every building has its own energy. Every location has its own energy, and it's all very different. And if you're receptive and you stop and listen, you can kind of sense that. And there have been homes I've walked into and I've taken one foot in and stopped and said, I can't. It's
Yeah.
there is a negativeness about this place. There is, and they're not always pleasant, and so sometimes I forced myself to walk through the home, maybe the homeowner's there, I've had that happen. I've had to, yeah, sure, it's nice, just
Right?
and then there's
Smile and
like
nod.
this negative energy vibe that's crawling all over your body, and you're just going, oh yeah, So, but yeah,
Yes.
how I got to writing. First off, I know, let's circle back. How I got to writing. I've always wanted to write. I have read. I used to sneak back in the 70s and 80s, I used to sneak the romances that my older sister and my mother had, the romance books. And I always crack jokes because I call them the Fabio covers, that had Fabio on them, that were all the naked chest and they were half painted. And, so I
Yeah.
called them the Fabio covers, and they were, but I snuck those around and read those, and I got hooked on historical romance, Regency, Scottish, British, any kind. That's what my mother and my sister were into. As I got older, I got really into sci-fi and the paranormal and science fiction romances, and time travel was especially appealing. The concept of time travel,
Yeah.
and how it works, the scientific explanations around it, which is interesting because I don't have a science background. I have a performing arts background. But it just really appealed to me. When I hit my 30s, because I'm not in my 30s now, when I hit my 30s, I really wanted to write. I really wanted to do it. And I sat down and started writing short stories. And, I lacked the technique of writing. I lacked the craft of what writing is. I knew the craft of storytelling. I've been telling stories my entire life, whether it's acting or dancing or, and it just putting it down in words, it took another technique level. And I believe in my 30s, I just lacked the maturity to take on something like that because it was going to handle a lot of criticism. I had been through a lot of criticism in specifically in the dance world. You take a dance class and it's nothing but critiques, and you stare at yourself in the mirror and you're wearing nothing but a pair of leotards and tights, and you're picking apart every little thing that you do wrong, as well as your teacher. And
Mm.
if it was the mean Russian teacher who banged her stick on the ground, it was even a little more mentally challenging. So, in my 30s, I tried it. I started and I said, maybe it's just not the right time for me. And maybe it's just something that's not right for me. I ended up having triplets, raised my triplets, tutored them all through high school and college. We entered the pandemic. And as we came out of the pandemic, I hit my mid 50s, and it was kind of like, if I'm ever going to do this, now's going to be the time. And
Mm.
I don't know if you want to call it a midlife crisis. I don't care what you want to call it. I just hit, I hit, those early to mid 50s. And it was like, if I'm ever going to do this, it's now or never. And, for many years, I'd owned a dance studio up until my kids were in elementary school. And from that point on, I didn't work a job, I worked, I tutored my kids, I managed my household, raised the triplets, got them through college, so I worked hard. It was a shock to my family when I said, I'm going to sit down and do this. And I stopped being the beck and call mom, right? The beck and call wife, which
Yeah.
might, don't get me wrong. My husband's extraordinarily supportive, and the poor man has to read my rough drafts. So, and he loves me
Mm.
still, but, so I just sat down and started writing. And, but before I even started writing, I took like 4 months of classes so I could work on that technique of writing. Because it's a craft, it's a practiced craft. There's the craft of writing and the art of storytelling,
Yeah.
and so you have to master both in order to put forth a really great product and what stories you're telling.
Exactly. I absolutely agree. And it's so funny that when you speak, I'm like, goodness, this is like my soul sister. You know what I mean? I've never met you, but we have so much similarities. And I don't have three kids, that and especially not triplets. I have two boys that are like 11 months apart, and
Close
they drive,
enough.
yeah, close enough, and they drive my world upside down. But it's amazing to me how you and so many other women, they are able to focus on just raising their children and just dedicate themselves just all to themselves. Like for me, I love my children, but to dedicate everything to them, that seems like a lot. I mean, it seems like I'm losing a part of myself. You know what I mean? And it's I I don't understand. I feel bad about myself as if I feel like if something's wrong with me that I don't have that same,
Oh, no, no,
like
no, no. Let's back up a second because I want to address this. I want to address this. Okay, first off, yeah, I um when I decided not to work and I decided to, focus on the kids, I still focused on me. I still did things for me. I still took some dance classes. I don't think at the time I was performing much. Um, when they were younger, I was performing a lot. By the time they hit elementary school and junior high, the homework hell started. And and once they hit junior high, we because we tutored them all as a group, they got accused of copying each other's work because it was too similar, and so then we had to do
oh,
separate tutoring sessions per kid, per subject, per night. Drove me nuts.
oh,
But,
oh my
I
goodness.
want to address this. Don't lose yourself, because it was a struggle. Because I almost, that I felt like you said, I felt like I was losing myself. I
Yeah,
was so buried in them. And so I did volunteer work. I still took dance class. I still did things that focused on me, that were
thank
part
you.
of what my life was, because it was a struggle. I remember, sitting there going, I am losing who I am. I took up
Mhm.
cooking as a hobby. I had gardening as a hobby. I volunteered for the Girl Scouts. I threw myself into the Boy Scouts. I still did dancing. I was involved in school stuff. I took my talents for performing arts and teaching, because I did teach dance for years. I owned a dance studio. And I took some of that into some of my volunteer work for the school in order to support my kids and support other kids. It's funny because, I was the mom that was always around and every kid knew me, and I was always, especially when they hit high school and because one went into band, one went into drama. Because I have two boys and a girl. So the first boy went into band. The second boy, he built the sets for drama. And then the girl performed. And so she did
Oh,
performing and singing. So, I was always in the fine arts wing,
yeah,
all through their high school years, and worked very closely with those departments. And it was 100% volunteer work, but it was, that was almost like revisiting myself, because I didn't lose myself and I got to take my talents, and really share them with people. I have a bachelor's degree in dance. I danced professionally with a ballet company. I did all this performance work and all this nonprofit performing work. I owned a studio. I ran a nonprofit dance company. All this before the kids hit, second, third grade. Um,
mhm,
so, I had a lot to bring to the table, and it was nice
yeah,
because I didn't lose myself. And I
that's
guess that's part
good.
of what my message I want to share is, you can still be a mom and not lose yourself. You just have to find what your talents are and where you can share that and where you can find yourself in this
The
without losing
balance,
yourself. Yeah,
yeah.
because it is a balance, and it's hard to be a modern woman. It is really hard to be a modern woman because you can't just be one thing. You got to be 10 things.
I know it's got multitasking to the like 100 max. Goodness gracious. But that's good. It's freeing. It's good to hear women like yourself, and just be so honest. It helps women like me, make sure that we're still, not crazy. We haven't flipped over the bin yet, because sometimes that's
Nope.
how we feel. We get put so much pressure on ourselves that we realize, like, you know what? No, everybody goes through this. Everybody goes through this, and it's crazy. Oh, anyways, let's go back to paranormal, because that's the topic. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. As you know by now, these side rants happen. So let me ask you, because it happens all the time. Do you think that having these paranormal experiences helped you validate your faith?
Oh, first off, okay, so one story comes to mind. First off,
Hmm.
I've never lost faith. Um, Faith in, and I love the fact that you just ask about faith. You don't ask about faith in God or faith in Buddha or faith in the gods. My books do span history. They time travel, and so they do go back far enough where they take place in Scotland. Most of them do. There's one that actually doesn't take place in Scotland. They time travel someplace different. That's a spoiler we can't share. That book's not
Hmm.
out yet. But
Hmm.
they do go back to a time where they talk about the gods and referring to the Norse gods. So but as far as my faith, I God's always been there. Do I think it's strengthened my faith? I wouldn't call it strengthened. I think it's affirmed. I think that it's given me a stronger connection to spirits and past. Because I've had some experiences with ancestors. When I brought the triplets home, and I finally had all three of them home because they were in a NIC unit and an ICU unit, and they don't let you bring multiples home all at once. They spread them out 1 week apart to make sure that you can hack it. Yeah,
Oh wow, I
and
didn't know that.
so yeah, so once sometimes they let twins come home together, but triplets, no, they spread them out. So they were spread out 1 week apart. And by the time I got the third one home, which was the girl, it was kind of like this because they were 4, 5, and 6 weeks in an ICU unit because they were born at 32 weeks. So that night I was putting in bed and I just had this overwhelming experience of my ancestors around me approving of it. And so you ask about reaffirming my faith in God. I think it's reaffirmed my connection with things that are bigger and beyond us and bigger and beyond our earth. One story that comes to mind that's really funny. Um, Back when I was in high school, I was dating a guy, casually dating a guy, and they invited me to go to church with them. So I go to church, and I had never been to their church, and I had never didn't know a lot about their denomination. I'm not going to say what denomination it was. It's different than mine. And I
Hmm.
didn't know a lot about the practices in church. And I had not been to a lot of different churches. I had been to our
Okay.
church. and it's still faith in God. They're just different denominations in Christianity. I didn't think anything of it. You go, you pray to God, thank you, God. You sing a few
Yeah.
hymns, you go home. It's
Yeah.
Sunday. So I joined his family for church, and I filled, they passed around the little thing you fill out as a guest or whatnot. And I don't know if I don't know if I had checked that they could come visit or not. So by the time the next Wednesday night rolls around, there's this knock on the door at like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night at my house. And I had no idea who it was. So his church comes over to visit. They send people from his church over to visit my home. and, and I live in Houston, Texas. I live, middle of Bible Belt, and that's fine. I love church. I love God. It's interesting living in the Bible Belt. So these people, and this was in the early '80s. So these people show up, and my dad, he's really upset that these people are in his home and wanting to talk to his daughter. It's nighttime. It's after dinner. I'm already in my pajamas, so I have to sit in my living room in my pajamas, and there are these people from this church, and so they just start asking questions. And one of the things they ask is, one of the questions they asked was, if you died today, what would you say to God tomorrow? And my dad got really mad, and my stepmother was with us. This was his second wife. So my stepmonster was sitting up at the bar, and she had to hold him down because he was going to jump up and say something. And it was so funny. My reaction was so priceless because this is so spot on me. High school. I'm a sophomore in high school, and I turn to this guy and I go, I can't die tomorrow. I have a history test. And so, it's a funny story in the family because it's like, I can't die tomorrow. I got things to do. It's too
Yeah.
busy. I'm not speaking to God tomorrow, but it was so funny because, at that time, I didn't feel like I was going to speak to God tomorrow. So I just didn't have anything to say. And
Yeah.
it just popped out of my mouth, like a lot of things do pop out of my mouth. But it was, I
Mine
can't.
too.
Yeah, me too. I know. Yeah, I'm that friend that says everything you're thinking that you don't want to say, but I
I
say it.
know. I
Yeah, that's me.
know. People
And
tell me that
sometimes
I
I
make
write
them
that
cry
way.
too much.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes I write that way and I love it. Sometimes I write
Mhm.
characters that way, and then they're so much fun. But yeah, I
Yeah.
popped off and was like, I can't die tomorrow. I've got a test.
I
And
know.
so
That's so
I
funny.
think I think they laughed and left. I think that was it. But that's a funny story when you talk about faith and what do you say and what do you think about it. And I think that I think my relationship with God does have a comical edge.
Oh,
He
yeah.
gifted. Oh yeah, he gifted me the triplets, and we just crack jokes about that. It's like he gives them to those people who can hack them, or he punishes us who thinks maybe I was too much of a hellion when I was a child. That I will
Oh my
say that
goodness.
my mother enjoys me struggling with my kids.
That is too
So,
funny. That is
so
too
yeah.
funny. Goodness. That is a good story. And I appreciate you telling me that because I like the way that you put it into perspective. You know what I mean? Because you made it not like as if it confirms that there's a God or anything like that. It's just that it affirms that, there's a relationship, there's something more out there. And I think that's the thing. People don't realize that there's something more than this life that we live.
Mhm.
There's an afterlife. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff in this world like living among us, because I've been in situations like you where, oh my goodness, and I hate house hunting because I'm currently house hunting too. And it's like, mm, goodness, it's a process. It's a draining process because when you already can spiritually connect naturally, it just happens naturally. You're just empathetic to just emotions that linger from people, and just very in tuned with yourself and your surroundings. It makes it difficult because you can feel sadness, you can feel anger that still lingers in areas, you can feel the pain that's still there. You can sometimes tell how somebody died in a place, you know what I mean? And it's
Mhm.
funny because sometimes I wait till the realtor or the person showing the house tells me like, "Yeah, somebody died," and I was like, "Yeah, I've been known that." But, had to tell me the truth or the lie. How did they die?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, please tell me because I would love your point of view versus the reality that I can feel and see in this home, because, man, even when I was younger, my mom was going, house hunting with my stepdad, my second Yeah, my second stepdad at the time. And, I didn't even get to see the houses or yet. They just went to the realtor brought back some, pamphlets, and I was like, "Okay, cool, have a good day," and then I went to sleep that night, and I literally had a dream that we lived in one of those houses, and there was a little girl spirit in there, and all she wanted to do was torment us, but she couldn't, so she tormented my dog, and she hung my dog, and I've seen my dog there, like, being hung and, like, squirming and dripping blood, and I was just like, "What the heck was that?" So then I wake up, I'm like, this is a crazy dream." So I tell my mom, and she's like, "Describe me the house." So I described it from the stairs to the
Mhm.
walls to the border of the trim, and she was just like, "That's this house." And I was just like, "Okay, well, can you not go to that house?"
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
already know what's in that house. Can you not go to that house? So it's just like sometimes it's such an amazing experience to actually have because when you come across that time frame where you have to be in it, it's like it validates also like what you see. It doesn't make you seem so crazy either. I mean, have you ever had moments where you felt crazy before you actually encountered the moment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and not necessarily crazy. There's a lot of déjà vu moments. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
dream moments where it's similar, but not exactly the same, but it's,
Yeah.
it's like I've been here. And, déjà vu is explained as echoes in the brain so that it comes out as memories. So déjà vu typically is a memory that your brain has attached itself to, and so you think that you've seen it before, but it's really from a memory, and that's what most déjà
Mm.
vu moments are. And these, now, once you figure out how the brain works with that and what those moments are, you can discern between what real deja vu is and what an attachment to your memory is.
Yeah.
And so, there I do have distinct moments where it's like I've dreamt this and now I'm doing it. That's happened a handful of times.
Mm. Yeah,
So
I can
yeah, but yeah,
imagine.
yeah, but no, I know
So
what you mean by walking the walking in a house and feeling something negative has that's always been a very strong emotion. And even I'll walk into, neighbors' houses or friends' houses, and it'll be like, "Yeah, no, this is just," So,
yeah, I know
yeah.
exactly what you mean, and it sucks that the time is running up. I'm gonna have to make some other excuse to bring you back on my show because it was such a great time speaking with you. Goodness, I felt like we could speak about everything in life.
Yes.
Everything that comes with life. It's such an easy conversation. I love these conversations because it makes um, not only the time go by, but it makes it realer for people, you know what I
Mhm.
mean, to connect with and to reflect on, you know what I mean? Because you brought a different way of wording things than from how I word it, and it helps people connect, you know what I mean, and understand and grasp it so that they can shift their perspective. And that's the whole point, is so that people can think about this in a whole different way. So before we fully wrap up, do you have any words of wisdom that you can leave us off with?
Mm, words of wisdom. Um,
I know you got them, girl.
you just have to have faith. You have to have faith that, a lot of my books are romance, so there's a lot of conversations about finding true love and soulmates and what the value of love is and how people connect and how people connect on more than just a physical level, how they connect on a metaphysical level. So, true love is strong. True love exists. Have faith and hope, and you just have to believe in yourself. And even everyone has hard times. Hard
Yeah.
times are part of life. And that's what I love about my books. There are hard times, and how people deal with that, how they cope with it, how they overcome that is a big message in the books, and how it comes out on a positive end. And I think that that's how I've approached my life. My husband and I have been married 31 years this last May, and we've raised these triplets, which is an adventure in and of itself. But it hasn't always come easy, but it's been a hell of a lot of fun. And I have a teammate to do it with. So have faith, hope, and you can find love.
There you go, I love it, that's goodness. Oh, I could give you a squeeze of a hug. Thank you so much, Margaret, for coming on my show, sharing your perspective, and if anybody wants to know more about her, and what she has to offer the world, especially with these books. I mean, how could you not want to read about romance and paranormal and finding that love? You know, everybody loves love, so why not read about it, right? Because you get more into it and you can visualize it. That's why I love reading and that's why I love books because you can you can visualize what the author is trying to portray in such a way that you have your own movie in your mind. You know what I mean? And romance and paranormal, those are my favorites too that I usually look into fantasy novels because goodness, you can truly get lost into a world that is amazing. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm so glad that I was able to catch your time and pick your brain. So yes, if anybody wants to know more about Margaret, I have her lovely photo on my website. Just click right there and you can find all the access and everything that she has to offer the world. So with that being said, always, always, always keep thinking, y'all. Bye.